All right, so we're going to solve a couple more inequalities today. Just reviewing our rules from yesterday. We're going to solve the two-step inequalities. These should look familiar because the only difference between what we've been doing for the previous weeks and this week is that these are going to have an inequality symbol. And as I showed you yesterday, what that means is their solutions then would be graphs, okay? And so we did these 3 examples yesterday, and we ended up with some graphs for the inequalities. So everything we do today, we're going to simplify both sides. The variables will already be on one side, and then we're going to solve the two-step equation, just like we've been doing the two-step inequality, excuse me. The big caveat here is we just need to make sure when we multiply or divide both sides by a negative number, we're going to make sure we flip that inequality sign around. So we're going to take a look at the worksheet from yesterday. You already did questions 1 through 6, and I've started question 7 for us. And then we're going to do a few more together. So if I'm looking at the original inequality, there is nothing to simplify on both sides. So I go ahead and I subtract the 4 from both sides. And so I'm left with n over 3. I always like to draw this line here. That's where my inequality goes, is less than 2. And then we remember that this is n divided by 3. So we're going to go ahead and multiply to undo that division by a 3. And we're left with n is less than 6. So make sure that you do not just write the number 6 on your answers today. After you show your work, circle the entire inequality, n is less than 6. Because this means any number smaller than 6 will work. In fact, 6 wouldn't work. So like any number smaller than 6, if this was a 2, 4 plus 2 over 3 is less than 6. So we need to make sure we're describing all of our solutions. Let's take a look at one where we actually do have to simplify both sides of the inequality. So we have negative 3 times parentheses r minus 4 is greater than or equal to 0. I go ahead and I am going to distribute that negative 3. So we have negative 3 times r. This means negative 3 times a negative 4 because r minus 4 is the same as r plus a negative 4. So we have negative 3 times negative 4, that's positive 12, is greater than or equal to 0. So we go ahead and solve the two-step inequality. We're going to undo the addition on both sides by subtracting. We then have negative 3r is greater than or equal to negative 12. We undo this multiplication by dividing both sides by a negative 3. And I'm going to put a star here because we talked about what happens when we divide by a negative number. When that happens, we have to remember that this inequality symbol is going to flip around. So this becomes, instead of r greater than or equal to, r is less than or equal to, and negative 12 divided by negative 3 is 4. So I'm going to go ahead and put a box around that because that describes all of the solutions to that. Let's go ahead and do a couple more. So we have negative 7x plus 7 is less than or equal to negative 56. I have everything simplified on both sides, so I'm going to go ahead now and subtract 7. Please be really, really careful with your negatives here. Negative 56 minus 7 is the same as negative 56 plus a negative 7. That's a negative 63. So we have left now negative 7x is less than or equal to negative 63. we're gonna go ahead and divide both sides by a -7. Once again, we just divided by a negative number. So I'm gonna go ahead and flip that inequality around. X is greater than or equal to +9. And then finally, we have 21 is less than or equal to -3p minus 7. So I'm going to simplify the right side of this inequality by distributing the -3. -3 times p is -3p. -3 times a -7 is positive or plus 21. So I go ahead and I undo that addition by subtracting. I have 0 less than -3p. And now you might think that this doesn't matter now because there's a 0 there, but it does. When we go to divide both sides by a -3, we are still dividing by a negative number. So we flip that inequality sign around. So if I continue this over here, 0 divided by -3 is 0. This was a less than by the 0, but now it's going to flip to a greater than, and then we have p. So the way that we would say that is p is less than 0. So you may write it that way if you want. Or you may write it that way. That means the same thing.